Okay, so the first thing that we need to do when we start developing any kind of field work is think about asking research questions, because these are actually how we focus what it is we're going to do. But research questions need to be thought about carefully to make sure they're of good quality. So when we're creating research questions, each question we create needs to be well focused. In other words, we don't want really vague questions that it's difficult to understand. They need to be very sharp, very focused, very clear. We also need to make sure that each question we ask focuses only on one issue. We don't want to ask questions that are getting us to look at two or three different things, because then again they become very vague. So each question needs to focus on only one issue or one particular focus. You also need to make sure when you're creating research questions that you can actually answer the questions that you're asking, in terms perhaps of having access to a location or having the equipment that you need. There's no point asking questions that you can't actually go and answer because you don't have the things you need. And therefore, finally, you need to have a clear idea of how you might be able to answer the questions involved. What kind of equipment will you need? What kind of methods will you use? Because it's only if you understand that you know that you can begin to answer the question. So you need to think about how you're going to do it. In this particular website, this particular case, we're going to have a focus on transects. And transects essentially are just straight lines through an actual feature, be it a river, across a beach, etc., where you can make observations or measurements along that line to see how things change over a given distance or a given transect. If we're looking at transects in relation to rivers, then there are a series of different questions that we can begin to ask to look at how observations or measurements change over a transect, over a given line, perhaps say from one side of a river to another. So for example, one question we might ask is, how does the cross-section of a river channel change from bank to bank? So if you go from the left bank of a river to the right bank of a river, how does the cross-section change? What's the change in depth of water, for example? Another question we might ask is, how does the velocity of river water change from bank to bank? As we go from the left to the right bank, are there parts of the river channel that are flowing more quickly than other parts? And therefore we can begin to get an idea of how that changes across the cross-section of the river or across the transect. A third question that we might decide to ask is, how does the size of sediment making up the riverbed change from bank to bank? So what we can do is start off at one bank and then at certain intervals across the river is actually see what the size of the sediment is on the river bed. Is it muddy? Is it sandy? Is it mostly made up of gravel? And again, charting across the transect how that actually changes. And then the final thing we can do is, having taken all of these various measurements, another question we can ask ourselves is, why do these different changes occur? And here we can begin to think about interpreting the data in relation to what we've learnt already about how rivers work.